Welcome to this episode of Unraveling Adoption, an intentional space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson. I'm a parent coach and an adoptive mom of a talented and thoughtful 19-year-old son, Joey, who is struggling to find his path. I'm walking beside him while working on my own personal growth and healing. We are committed to helping anyone touched by adoption, and we want to help the general public understand adoption's complexities better too. Today's guest is Chester Jackson. His life has centered on adoption in several ways. He is a late discovery adoptee, finding out he was adopted at age 33. He's also a parent by adoption, guardianship, and by birth, and he's been an adoption professional for over 20 years. He is currently the helpline coordinator at the Adoptive Foster Family Coalition of New York, FFCNY. And I met Chester several weeks ago when he was the co-host of a radio show that AFFCNY produces. So thank you for joining me here on Unraveling Adoption, Chester.
Thank you so much. This is a great opportunity. And I just want to say I love the title of this show.
Yeah, we're just unraveling it. Just pick a strand. We're just going to pull it apart every which way. And you have seen adoption from every which way, right?
Yes, ma'am.
I always want to center adoptee voices. So I want to start with your perspective as a late discovery adoptee. Okay. And what were the circumstances around your adoption? Why didn't you find out till you were 33? Oh, my goodness.
Alrighty. It sounds a lot complicated than it actually was, but I was born in 1958, so it was a while ago. One of the things that's always been happening in the Black community, and that's African-American person, same race adoption, there wasn't always foster care services available. And I remember this growing up. Whenever there were issues in the family members stepped up and kids were often moved around. We had cousins that lived with us off and on for summers, sometimes for a year, that kind of thing. And apparently what happened is very similar to that. Both of my mothers, my adopted mother and my birth mother, were friends. And for what reasons I do not know, when I was conceived and born, it was determined that I was not going to go home with my birth mother. And I went home with my adopted mother, even though there was no technical legal adoption, or it was really just an agreement between these two women and a much larger community. And so that was that. And I went there and I grew up in that family. And my family consisted of my adopted mother, her sister, and a brother who also came to her in the same way, who was not biologically related to me, wasn't related to her. And it was a very similar situation, I'm told. So I went through that, grew up. And at 33, I found myself, just in the way circumstances go, I'd just begun working in older child adoption. And I was going off to Canada for some reason. And I had to get a copy of my birth certificate. And I went down to the Department of Social Services, to Vital Statistics, and I wasn't in there, was the story I was given. And so that was an obvious clue. We went off to Canada. Long story short, when I came back, my mother actually gave me a copy of my original birth certificate. And that began my adoption journey. And I was 33 years old and married and quite confused.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm amazed that your mother had your original birth certificate and she knew enough to keep it and to hold it for you. Wow. So was that common at that time and in that culture to just kind of take care of each other's kids and just
that apparently was a pretty common thing.
Okay. And it wasn't like they were trying to hide it from you, really, right? Or were they just like, well, this is just how it goes?
No, they were purposely hiding. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Because I was never informed.
Okay.
And my biological siblings were never informed, even though there were several that were old enough to know when I came. But I didn't go home with my birth mother at all. I went straight from the hospital to my adoption. So I don't know how they explained that to the other children, but
like, where'd the baby go that was in your tummy? Oh, wow. So they just like, la, 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 la. Do you think they all had a discussion and said, okay, we're just not going to tell this?
I would imagine, because I've reconnected with my siblings and there were 8 of us all told. And I was the 7th and there was at least 1 or maybe 2 born after me. But anyway, I reconnected with my older sisters, and the one sister who contacted me, she remembers that we were at lunch and I was very young, 6 or 7. And she pointed out, hey, look how much Chester looks like Jerome. And after that, that was the end. I hadn't seen them again until I was almost 40 years old.
Oh, wow. They're like, danger, danger. Yeah. Oh, wow. And were you the only one that was adopted?
Yes, I was the only one who was placed out, although apparently there was a brother who spent some time in foster care somewhere in there. And that I only know through stories. I don't have any evidence of that.
Okay. Now, I'm just an outsider here looking in, but I kind of would be pissed if I was the 7th one. Like, you can handle 6, but you can't handle 7. Yes. And then the 8th one got kept. And I'm feeling a little sad for you. What went through your mind when you found out all this?
Oddly enough, and this was due in large part to the fact that I never felt like I didn't belong.
Okay.
I never felt unloved. I never felt any of the things that we typically think of for adopted people.
Mhm.
What I did feel was this deep seated sense of unworthiness. And I never really believed it. I felt it, but I never really accepted that it was me,
Uh,
although I had no evidence that it was
uh,
anybody
uh,
else. So when I actually got the news from my mother, when she actually handed me the birth certificate,
mhm.
I just felt incredible relief. This is what it was about. This is why I felt so other. This is why I felt so
Uh,
different. And unworthiness is probably too strong a word, but I just felt like something wasn't right. And I tried and I tried and I
yeah.
tried, and I could never get rid of
Uh-huh.
that feeling.
Yeah, so you try with your cognitive
Yeah.
brain to go, "Well, I have good self-esteem, I'm working
Right.
hard, I'm getting whatever good grades or
Right.
whatever, and why do I feel like this?" And of course, you
Right.
would feel like that if you were separated from your birth mother and you had no idea
Yes.
why. And
Yes.
oh,
Now I did
wow.
I did eventually come to the anger part for just all the reasons you
Yeah,
thought about
okay.
as I got pieces of the story. Now, I think what happened ultimately is both of my mothers died before I really had an opportunity
Oh.
to well, my birth mother, she died when I was like 15. And my adopted
Oh,
mother died probably 15 years ago. And we had very
okay.
limited discussions around that. She just couldn't go
Yeah.
there. Even after I found out,
Mm,
she just couldn't go there. And I was not at a place where I would force her.
yeah.
If it were today, I would be
Mm,
forcing her to have those conversations. But
yeah,
at that
yeah.
point, I just
I
couldn't.
deserve
Yeah.
to know
At
this.
that point, I just couldn't.
Yeah. So, your birth mother died when you were 15, but you had no idea she was
Right.
your birth mother.
I thought she was what we call play relatives. Those people that are like family, and everybody has them,
Oh,
like,
okay.
oh, this is my auntie so and so.
Uh-huh. Right.
And so she was my aunt. And I remember I had a
Uh,
broken hip. I was in the hospital, and my mother came and told me that your aunt so and so passed. And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. Now, at this point, I hadn't seen her in 10 years. I mean, it was forever. I hadn't seen
oh,
her in a
wow.
long time. And so I was like, oh, wow. But I could tell
Oh,
there
yeah,
was
go ahead.
something going on there that wasn't being
Mm.
said. And it was just,
Your
yeah.
auntie died, and you're like, "Why are you
Yeah.
telling me
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
this?"
yeah. And it was another one of those moments where I didn't have an explanation for,
Mm,
but I knew something was happening underneath the surface. And I filed it away. And then, of
yeah.
course, it made sense later. It was like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. Okay, so when you found this out at 33, you were already, I believe,
yes,
working in
yes,
adoption. So how did you get into the adoption
yeah,
profession? Usually people get into it because they're an
yeah,
adoptive parent or an adoptee
yeah.
themselves. And
None of that. I went to college with Pat O'Brien, who was the executive director of the agency at the time.
Mhm.
And I went to college with him, and he called me up one day and he said, hey, I have a great job I think you'd be really good at. And what I was doing is what we called intake coordinator when we were placing older kids. So I would interview young
Okay.
people and I would interview families and I try to connect. So I did
Okay.
that for several years. And this is how I feel the connection to adoption. Because if I hadn't been working in this field, adoption would have been a non thing for me. It just would have been, well, this is what people did. I was raised by this person and accepted. But what I began to realize
Mhm.
over the years of working with so many young people and so many
Mm.
families that these are adoption issues and that my underlying feeling that I've had all my life
Yes.
stems from the separation from my birth mother without an explanation.
Yes.
And then one of the things that I began to see as part of the parent training process is you see all of these intense emotions that people can't even say the word sometimes without just bursting into
Mhm.
tears and all of this intensity. And I began to put
Mhm.
the pieces together. So I know my mother, there were moments when she was holding me, when she was transmitting whatever losses she was dealing with. And
Oh,
as a kid, I
yeah.
had no explanation for it. And I grew up this people pleasing, always trying to make my mother happy. No matter what you do, don't upset mommy. And
Yeah.
all of that stuff I figured out stemmed from the fact that I had no
Yeah.
other explanation. And so I spent
Yeah.
so many years of my life, including these days, trying to convince adoptive
Uh-huh.
parents and prospective adoptive parents
Mm.
how important it is for you to get a handle on what's driving you. Because you're going to be
Yeah.
transmitting that to your child, whether you use words or not.
Mhm.
And you want to be transmitting some logical explanation that they can process, not this vague kind of, that's fine. And clearly it's not.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
right, right. Because if it's not open, but everything's sort of chaos or unclear or
Mhm.
unpredictable, the kid's gonna think it's them,
Yes. Yes. Because you cannot
that
hide it.
they have no other way to yeah, it'll come
Yeah.
through.
But people don't believe that.
You have to keep talking to them.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that must be frustrating. Because the next day after you found
Mm.
this out, that you were able to go to
Mhm.
work, did your whole work life change? Did you see things way differently after you found out you were an
I'm going to
adoptee?
say no, because I
No?
spent, and I'm realizing that now because it's funny how life is. I'm at a place now where my job requires me to look at a broader perspective. The blinders have to be open
Oh,
because I deal with
uh-huh.
everybody involved. And that includes birth
Yeah.
parents and that includes adoptees from all over, all kinds of different situations. And so back in
Mhm.
those days, because my job was parent recruitment and support,
Oh, yeah.
I was focused from the perspective of the adoptive parent. And then once, of course, I became an adoptive
Okay.
parent, because in this work, you meet children that sometimes you just can't let go, you know,
Yeah. Oh, and that's what happened to you.
and I
Okay.
got a couple of those.
Okay.
And then once I became an adoptive parent, my goal still was to help other adoptive parents understand how impossible it is to keep whatever drove you to this path,
Yeah.
to keep you from that. It's impossible trying to hide that. You think, oh, I dealt with that. And really, if you haven't dealt with
Mm.
it, you haven't dealt with
Mhm.
it. Just because I haven't thought about it in 15 years doesn't mean
Yeah, yeah.
it's still there. So I spent most of my time trying to focus folks on that. And that's a real hard sell. And I think it's because adoption and parenting in general, but especially adoption, is so personal. The motivations are
Mhm.
not the stuff that we all say. I love children. I have a calling. All
Mhm.
of those things people say. Because if that were the case, there'd be no kids in care. There'd be no kids in care
Right.
anywhere because everybody loves
Right.
children. Everybody has a calling. Everybody has that energy to give. But what makes
Right.
you jump through the hoops, whatever they are, to get into this process and then to stay in this process and then to endure
Mhm.
this process, that's not about anybody
Yeah.
else but you. And if you're
Mm.
not clear on the why, because as an adoptive parent, you spend many hours in the beginning at least saying, why do I do this? Your friends and your family and the people that love you, they will feed you the answer. And the answer was you were happy before this kid came. And now you're not happy. So
Oh,
here's the
yeah.
problem. You know what I mean?
Oh. So the kid becomes the
Yes.
project or the thing to be
Yes.
fixed
Yes.
instead of whatever brought you to the
Yes.
situation. So are you talking about infertility
All of
grief,
it.
that kind of
All of it.
thing?
Whatever your reason was, whatever your motivation was for doing this most unusual thing,
Yeah.
it's not just altruism. I'm sure there's some folks who was purely, but it's not just altruism. It's just not.
Because if it were just altruism, we would do whatever it would take to keep our kids with their
Yes.
parents, their birth
Yes.
parents, right?
Yes. Why? Because that's in the best interest of the child.
Absolutely. And people say, well, what if the parent is abusive? Well, then you find a relative or another guest, Harrison Mooney, suggested, well, adopt the birth mother and the child.
Yes.
Is that done? Do people do that?
Not that I know of. Although there's some who what we call moral adoption, where there's no legal adoption, where I know this is
Oh,
my
okay.
kid and he's going to be my kid, yada, 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 usually with older kids.
Uh-huh.
So I'm sure there's some of those. And I've met some folks who do everything but adopt the birth.
Yeah.
I mean, where they're
Okay.
really connected. And that's the way
Yeah.
it should be. Because we all know, as much as we harangue about family, 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 that if that
Mhm.
indeed is the most important thing and the only thing, then why would we be actively looking to separate young people from their families, whatever the circumstance?
Oh, yes. Unfortunately, my adoption for my son was closed because it was international and just like they wanted him as far away from Japan as
You
possible. So thinking about pursuing reunion sometime in the next couple of years, I don't know. But I see all the time in adoptive parent forums, in the US, open adoption is more of the thing. But as soon as that birth parent is a little
yeah,
flaky or asks a little bit
yeah.
too much or is a little bit not quite pulled together when they meet,
Shut it down.
they
Yep.
cut it off. And it just seems from my perspective like there's just so little grace or empathy for what that birth parent has to go through
Yes,
to come toward you as an adoptive parent. And it just breaks my heart. I'm like, oh
absolutely.
God, do whatever you can to keep that relationship together.
Absolutely. And if indeed the system was geared to encourage that and support that
Yeah.
in a real way, that would be the norm, but
Yes.
it's not.
But there's nothing protecting the birth parents, right? Like they
Yeah,
say, they sell it to these birth parents. Oh, it'll be an open adoption. You'll be able to see them whenever you want. Da, 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 da. There's
yeah,
no legal
yeah. No.
recourse for the birth parent.
What do you call?
Yeah. Yeah. Who are
What
you
do
going
you
to call?
call?
Yeah. They're the low man on the
Yeah,
totem pole in that one. Yeah. That's really, really tough. That's one of the many things that is
yeah,
the problem with adoption. And you probably see, so you're dealing with older kids
yeah,
that have languished in foster care,
yeah,
right? And you're trying to find them
yeah.
permanency. Your kids that you get at your agency, their birth parents are
Well, right now, the coalition, the Adoptive and Foster Family Coalition, is a post-placement support organization. We're not a child placing agency.
oh, you don't
We don't have any
place.
children in our care here. We're purely about supporting families, adoptive, kinship, and foster.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
But I mean,
Do you still go find parents though? Is that used to be your job? Do you still do that
in my
part?
previous life,
Oh,
from
okay.
1990 to about 2014,
Oh, I see.
I've only been with the coalition a couple of years since the pandemic.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, but my entire career is based on that other premise of supporting families, connecting young people with families,
Mm,
all of that process. Yeah,
yes. So what are some other problems with this gigantic multi-billion-dollar industry
yeah.
that you see from your perspective?
Well, from my experience, the hardest part about it is understanding how difficult it is. Once you pull a child out of their family for whatever reason, and what foster care does is pulls them out of their family and totally disconnects that family. So it's not like we're
Yeah.
supporting some of those folks. And if indeed our system was more about pulling them out for safety, if that needs to happen, but also
Uh-huh.
looking to put them with a family member, not disconnecting them
Mhm.
from that family. Now, none of
Yes.
this would be easy. It's not going to be any easier. But in the long run, over the span of a child's life, I think it would be much more beneficial because you're looking at balancing out an impossible trauma to heal. But Gabor Mate talks about healing is more of a path, right? And sometimes we're on the
Yeah,
path
yes.
and sometimes we're off the path and then we're on the
That's
path.
right.
And
That's
the best
right.
we can hope for is to be on the path more than we're off it, you know? And if we thought
Right.
about the journey for these children and for all of us and for us as adoptive parents, the journey is more about being on the path than off. And I
Mhm.
know it sounds flaky,
Mhm.
but the gist of it is the hardest part about being an adoptive parent is you're almost guaranteed to be disappointed. You know, you're almost
Mm.
guaranteed to be
Mhm.
disappointed because your motivation and your drive and everything you're thinking is
Mhm.
involved around some fantasy child. It's not
Yes.
about that
Yeah.
real human being who shows up at your door, whether they're infants or whether they're 14.
Yeah.
And we keep treating them as if nothing happened until they came to us.
Yeah, with the blank slate thing that everyone is told and
Absolutely.
oh,
None of it matters. None of it matters. And the reality
yeah.
is, all of it is a part of it. The fact that
All of
they're
it matters, yeah.
adopted at all, we can never let that go because that child is never going to be unadopted. He's never going to be at some point where, oh, no, I was
Yeah.
adopted a long time ago. It doesn't matter. You know, you're never going to be that.
And there's never a happy reason that someone needs to be adopted either.
Absolutely.
It's not like someone gives birth and goes, "You know what? This one I'm just gonna
Yeah,
give to somebody else that
absolutely.
wants it more than me." No, it's always some sort of trauma or some sort of disaster, chaos, something really hard.
And we need to fill in those blanks. And it's much better if you do
Mm,
it incrementally over the course of a
that's
lifetime.
good.
Then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
Johnny's 14 and he finds his birth certificate. Then what do
Oh,
you
yeah, I
do?
know, it's so horrible.
You know?
Even sometimes I have a 5-year-old and he doesn't know yet. How will I tell him? I'm like, "Yeah, you should have told him 5 years ago."
Absolutely.
But tell him now because if you wait any longer, it's gonna
Absolutely.
even be worse.
Absolutely.
Just jeez, just tell them. You know, when I was raising Joey, I got that message, luckily, to tell him from day
Mhm.
one, but it was more like, "Celebrate it.
Right.
You're adopted, we love you so much, and you're so lucky," and da 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 da. The songs and everything. So that's what I did, which I guess that's better than not telling someone or making it some sort of shameful thing, but it negated the whole other
Yes.
half where, God, this is really tough. This
Yes.
must be hard. Where is
Yes.
your birth mother? I don't know. And
Yes.
gosh, I think that second half
Yeah.
is the really tough part
Yeah.
to sit with your kid and go, God, I'm
Yes.
so sorry. This must really hurt.
Yes. And that's about our
Yeah.
pain, not theirs. That's about
Yes.
our
It's
pain.
hard for us to see
Yes.
our kids in pain
Yes.
and then we feel guilty.
Yes.
And then we feel guilty for feeling guilty
Yes.
and not just enjoying our children. You
Yes.
know, why can't I just enjoy what I have? And all these many, many layers that need to be just
And
deconstructed.
that's the parenting piece.
Yeah.
The hard stuff is the
Yeah.
parenting piece. Nobody needs help with the good stuff. Nobody needs help with the easy stuff.
Right. That inner work
Yeah.
that you can sort of hide on the
Mm.
outside when you take your kid to baseball and when
Mm.
you're at the teacher conferences, you can sort of get through, but it's that inner work when you're at home and things are hitting the
Yeah.
fan. Where do you as a parent go?
And those are the red flags. Those are the areas where we should be
Mm,
looking. The more excited you get about something, whatever it is, that's the area in your
mhm.
life you need to start figuring out. Well, what is this about? Why does the fact that
Okay.
he's lied to me, why is that so devastating?
Oh.
Why is the fact that he told me I'm not his real mommy? Why is that so devastating to me? You know,
Mm,
it's not about that. I mean,
yeah.
it's certainly not a secret. I mean, you know what I know, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Why, when he speaks those words, does that just hit
yes.
you so hard? So that's therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or parent
Ideally,
coaching.
ideally therapy, but
Yeah, and with an adoption competent therapist, right? Like somebody that really gets this stuff.
absolutely. And the other piece that I'd like to just get out there is it doesn't mean something's wrong with, there's a disconnect. We all have challenges. Nobody
Hmm.
goes through life without all kinds of different challenges. And those
Sure.
challenges are the things that we have to address because I don't think you can hide them. I don't think you ever can hide. They're going to
Mm,
be anniversaries. They're going to be all kinds of things that happen that trigger something in you.
for sure.
And we're constantly trying to find the right prescription to fix the kid so I don't feel whatever it is I feel, you know?
That's such a strong tendency to fix the
Yep.
kid. Oh, the kid's the problem. The
Yep.
kid's the problem. Take the kid to the
Yep.
psychiatrist or take the kid this and
Yep.
that. Oof. They probably also need help.
Hmm.
We can look at
Yeah.
ourselves much more deeply, I think. How have you handled that as an adoptive parent? And maybe you could let us know what order you did things
Yep.
in as a parent.
My wife and I have 5 children. We
Mhm.
started out I was working at this agency, and there was a young man on my caseload. He was 16 years old, and he was 6 feet tall, and he was 300 pounds. But he was the
Okay.
sweetest human being in the world. I mean, he was just a great and still is, just the greatest person. Just I couldn't understand why people weren't
Huh.
running to this kid because he sounds like
Wow.
everything everybody wanted. He wanted to be adopted. He wanted to have a dad. He wanted to have a
Oh.
mom. He wanted to have a
Oh.
home. And one day I literally went home to my wife and said, honey, guess what I found? And we started talking about it and we started visiting with him. And as it sometimes happens, I'm hearing that it's not statistically as prevalent as we think it is, but my wife got pregnant.
Yeah.
So our biological son was born. Our first adopted son moved in. He had a sister.
Okay.
One thing led to another. She came with us.
Okay.
So we went from having no children to a baby, a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old.
My
So needless to
gosh.
say, our learning curve was,
Whee!
and I have to admit, in all honesty, I was not the most patient, loving, understanding, TBR based, conscious parent
Uh-huh.
that I like to think I am now, and that I certainly encourage people to be.
Explain what TBR is.
Trust based relational intervention. And it's one of those really wonderful things that you need to check out if you're interested in doing something different with your children. And that's usually folks
Mhm.
who've been up and down and around and about before they get ready to say, I don't know what else to
Yeah.
do yet.
They've been through it a bit.
All of those kind of things. And there's so many of them. There's so many resources
Mhm.
that people can take advantage of. But first, you have to accept that what my mom did and what my dad did,
Yeah.
it may not be working with this one.
Yeah.
I've raised 7 kids. They're all wonderful, blah, 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 blah. It's not working with this one.
Mhm.
They have to accept that I have to do something different with this child because this experience is different. No
Yeah.
matter how young you got them, I hear that all the time. I took a life from the spell.
Yeah.
What's this trauma stuff?
Yeah.
It's like, you have to understand that adoption is not a good thing. Something bad happened.
It's trauma to start
we
with, no matter what.
and we cannot pretend that it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
even though they don't have words for it. 'Cause I'm a prime example. I had no words for it. I've
Yeah.
never felt unloved in my home. I've never felt abused.
Yeah, you had a great family growing
I had
up.
none of that stuff. But there was this underlying thing
Mhm.
that I couldn't get a handle on, and my mother could not help me with it because she couldn't speak the words.
Ah.
And sometimes I just think about what kind of pain she must have been in for so
Oh.
many years that 2 children she brought in
Mm.
this way. What's that
Mm.
story about?
Mm.
So, I mean, find out what's
Mhm.
grieving you. Find out what brought you down
Yeah.
this path. People
Yeah.
don't do this.
I know for me, I was so wanting a child. My biological clock was ticking. I tried all sorts of treatments.
Yeah.
And then we're like, I can't do this anymore. The infertility thing was like torture.
Hmm.
All the hormones and everything made me crazy. And so we're like, okay, forget this. Let's do adoption. And it just happened quickly. And there's no time because the
Hmm.
baby's coming. And well, now we're doing this. I wish this will never happen, but the infertility clinics really should have some therapists on board to help process that transition and that grief. But
I would agree.
they'll never do that because they just want you to keep
No,
going.
it's bad for business.
Yeah. So I wish somebody would have said, Beth, take just a moment, a couple of
Yeah.
months or a year or whatever, and work through this
Yeah.
loss because I'm
Right.
dealing with it now, 20 years later. And it is not easy.
Yeah. Just listening to some of your podcasts and whatnot, it looks like from the outside that you came to it and you came to it in a big way. That there's some things that I need to figure out that's going to help me.
Yeah. For a year after Joey's crisis at 15, he tried to kill himself
Yeah.
and uses drugs and da 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 da.
Mm.
I fell apart. Like for a whole year, I was trying to fix him. I thought he was the problem. I took him to every
Yeah.
place I could find. Then I got a life coach and I'm like, oh, it's not just him.
Yeah.
It is definitely me. My stuff is being brought up into all this. It's a family systems problem. And I went on my deep dive into my own personal growth. And my son is my best teacher ever. And I'm grateful. I'm not grateful that this is the path we had to take, but I'm grateful for the process and where I've gotten with it.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever would have
Yeah.
dug this deep if this major crisis hadn't occurred.
Yeah. And how many parents, they just do whatever they do, and they're estranged from their children forever,
Mhm.
and on and on and on. It's so painful. It's such an
Yeah.
awful memory because it was just too much for them to find out what their piece in it was,
And it's
you
a
know?
defensive stance, and I totally get it because I did that for a year. Like, no, no, we did everything
Yeah.
possible for this kid. We did
Yeah.
everything right. Da, da, da.
Yep.
It's him that's wrong.
Yep.
Oh, it's a tough, tough pill to swallow.
Yeah. And sometimes when you hear it, I mean, I know plenty of folks who have done a lot of folks who have done A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, all the way through
Mhm.
the gamut. And
So,
they still are so frustrated by it. And we're still forgetting the common denominator.
oh,
We're still forgetting that you're still there.
yeah.
And I guess the idea of helping parents appreciate the fact that job one should be connecting with you,
Mhm.
remembering that he's a
Yeah.
stranger, even if he's a little cute, beautiful little stranger, he's a stranger
Mhm.
to you. And all that stuff that happens between mother and child without
Mhm.
words, all of
Yeah.
that stuff, you got to give that somewhere
Yeah.
down the road. And you can give it to
Yeah.
him later. You can, but you're just going to have to deal with the additional behaviors that come along with the body not having gotten it before.
Yeah. And just know that that's going to come up. It's
That's
going to
coming.
come up
That's a part of it.
somehow or
Yes.
other.
Yes. And this is how we nurture him. We nurture him or her by understanding that, yes, of course, there's going to be this period where I have to convince you that I'm going to be a safe
Yeah.
person. And maybe it's going to take 6 months. Maybe it's going to take 3 weeks. Maybe it's going to
Yeah.
take 10 years. But that should be job number one.
Yeah. I hope that agencies and post placement places like AFFCNY, I know you guys are doing great work, and I hope that message is getting out there more than what I received. Although my agency in Japan was the one person shop and she didn't do anything regarding any of
Yeah.
this. So maybe mine was sort of different.
Yeah.
But are parents getting better training in the larger agencies?
Certainly
Mhm.
more. They're getting more. That's a good thing. But I still would like to see our society overall understand and have a fuller appreciation for the importance of how we raise our children in general.
In general, yeah. It's
In
just
general,
parenting.
just in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's a relationship problem from stem to stern,
Oh my god, all
you
you gotta do
know?
is sit on the sidelines of a baseball game for kids,
Yep.
even little ones, and
Yep.
the investment that these parents have in these kids'
Yes.
outcomes,
Yes.
it's ridiculous. Oh my goodness.
I've got a story for everything. That's what happens when you've been around for it. The thing I remember once I was defending my son. He played soccer all his life. I'm defending him and I'm saying, this coach is, blah, 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 blah. And he said to me, and he was probably 9, 10, 11, and he said, Daddy, you never played the game.
Oh, little
The
burn.
coach was right,
Oh,
and I learned a valuable lesson. I said, well, of course he's right. I don't know. I know this
yeah.
game, and I changed my whole interaction with him.
Oh.
Then I started asking questions. Well, how do you feel about that? Was that the right decision? Did he do that right?
Oh.
So even when he was angry with the coach, he understood. But
Oh.
I think we're so caught up in our stuff. And I was
Mhm,
there at the baseball games and
mhm,
softball games with my daughter and the recitals and all that stuff.
mhm.
But I lived vicariously through him
Yep,
because I didn't
right,
have any of that growing up. There was
right.
no team sports. I wasn't doing that. My mother had to work and that was it.
Mhm.
And I loved it all. And fortunately for me, I was doing this work.
Yeah.
So I was having this conversation. I was
Mhm.
talking to people, and that's my saving grace.
Yeah.
If I could do anything to change this field, is I would have everybody who's involved on any level talk to adopted people, talk to
Oh,
adopted youngsters,
yes.
all those families, help those families understand and see that job one has to be the connection.
Connection.
Nothing else matters. If I don't care about you, I don't care what you do. I can live in your house. I can do whatever I do. But
Mhm,
if I don't have that sense that you're a safe person, you're
mhm,
worth connecting to,
mhm.
nothing else matters.
That
Nothing
is
else
for
matters. And
sure.
if you just want to win, I used to tell people in the old days, if you just want to win as an adoptive parent, all you got to do is not give up. Don't give up. You can be the worst parent in the world.
Yeah,
Don't give up. And,
yeah.
and that kid will be better off.
Yeah, because that's a big fear for the adoptee, right? Is to be given up on again.
But why do that to yourself?
Yeah.
I do that to yourself. That's not the kind of parent. Nobody wants to be that kind.
No.
Nobody wants to be that. Rah, 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 rah.
Right, right,
You
right.
know, if we change our perspective a little bit in terms of what we need and remember that whatever's happening, is this going to bring us closer together or push us further apart?
Yes.
Now, there are going to be times when we're going to have to do things that's going to cause a little distance, but that's okay. But that's not the majority of it.
Right,
The
right, right.
majority of it are the little knucklehead things. I'm tired. I'm angry. Go away. Blah, 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 blah. And they pile up. And especially when you come from a background where that's the norm,
Mhm,
they
mhm.
become bigger and bigger and bigger.
Oh, like if you're a foster kid and had a lot of yelling and screaming
Yes, a
and
lot of chaos.
yeah.
But as a parent, you have the opportunity, one, to do the repair.
Hmm.
You have the opportunity to go back and fix it.
Yep.
Our parents didn't do that, to go back and say, maybe I overreacted or whatever. So you
Hmm.
always have the opportunity to do it
Hmm.
right, even if you screwed it
Yeah,
up the first time,
for
even
sure.
if you
For
screw
sure.
it up the second time. Do the repair.
For sure. Yeah. And that teaches your kids how to make repairs.
Yes.
If you never
Yes.
apologize to your kids or never
Yes.
go, yeah, mama
Yeah.
just messed that up, they think, oh, I
Yeah.
guess grown-ups are perfect and I'm the one that's
Yep.
messing up everything. Yeah.
That's right. And how amazing is it when you come from experience where no adult has ever said to you,
Mhm.
I might have overreacted. I'm
Mm.
sorry. I wish I hadn't done it that way.
Mhm.
Let me explain to you what I was trying to do.
Wow, powerful.
That's incredibly powerful. And all of us have the capacity to do that.
For sure.
You don't have to be some superstar. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody has the power to say, wow, I wish I would have handled that different.
Mhm.
And if you can't say that, that's a message you need to understand too.
Yeah.
Why can't I say that to my child?
More therapy, therapy for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. Or at least go to groups.
Groups. Oh, there's
We have
so many
at the
groups.
coalition, we have tons and tons
You
of
do.
support groups. Everything is virtual these days.
Uh-huh.
There's no excuse.
Oh, there's so many options.
Find a time and listen.
If anyone needs resources of any sort, I've got a gigantic list of them. I'm happy to help. And I will definitely put AFSC NY's website
Mhm.
in the show notes here. And you run the helpline. What is that?
Yes. The helpline, I love the helpline because the idea for the helpline is it's one place that folks can call to get access to anything that the coalition provides. Right. So I get calls from the full gamut. I get calls from adoptees that have questions about how do I get my records? How do I do that? How do I
Mhm.
do that? I get calls sometimes from folks who are in some kind of emotional state for
Mhm.
whatever reason and they want to know who they can sue and all this kind
Okay.
of stuff. I get calls about support groups, about the process. It's an opportunity for folks to call if they want to vent
Uh-huh.
about their agency because we're not an agency. We're not affiliated with anyone. What we try to provide is information, support, and advocacy.
Okay.
And if I could sell any prescription, the support piece is the most important thing. If you don't do anything else as an adoptive or foster parent, join a group that's more than just about complaining. Join a
Uh-huh.
group where you have folks who are experienced
Mhm.
and you will find people who have been where you're going or where you've
Yep.
been and you're not alone. And there are a billion ideas out there. There's no more resourceful group than adoptive, foster, and kinship families
Oh, yeah.
because they've dealt with everything.
Yep.
Just don't get yourself disconnected. Don't talk to your brother, your sister, your cousin, the people who are your usual support
Yeah.
network because they can't support you in this. They don't know anything about this. They love you. All they know is you were happy before and now you're not. So there's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
simple solution.
Yeah. There's something about being with other adoptive parents and they just
Yes.
go, yep.
Yes.
Yep.
And that's
Been there, done
incredibly
that.
healing.
Yeah, it is.
Incredibly healing. And just full of good ideas. Yeah.
All you gotta do is just be in the room and then also the list of ideas that you're gonna get, but just the
Mhm.
nods of
Yes.
understanding and empathy.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And same for adoptees. Get in
Yes.
rooms with other adoptees, right?
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
get your kids in those rooms.
Yes. And we've got a group for teens,
Mhm.
young teens and older teens. We've got a group for what we call just adoptees because you hear that saying, people say, well, I could talk about this, but I'm just an adoptee. And so we started
Oh,
this group called Just Adoptees. And the whole purpose of that is it's a space where people can come and they can do whatever they need to do. Some
okay.
people need to complain. Some people need to cry. Some people need to reflect. And it's not therapy. All it is a group of people saying, I get it. Yep.
Uh-huh.
Wow. Yeah.
And I know your group is in New York,
Yes.
but you have to be from New York to call your helpline.
Oh, no, no, no. I get calls from all over the country.
Okay.
And all I do in the most part is refer them to their local, whatever,
Yeah.
whatever. A lot of folks call because they're surprised, first of all, to get a human being.
Ah,
So and I'm the helpline, but there's usually other folks answer as well. But it's almost always somebody going to pick up,
nice.
you know? The helpline is 24/7, but I
Okay.
mean, nobody calls me at 4 o'clock in the morning usually. But periodically, I get some 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock calls.
Uh-huh.
And the goal again is it's just a portal.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes all I do is listen to them.
Yeah.
And because I've been around for a long enough period, I can help them understand, well, there are some system things that happen and, just kind of do some light coaching, for
Uh-huh.
lack of a better term.
Yeah.
So it's really just a line for folks to get some questions answered, maybe a little direction. Nothing necessarily gets fixed, but
Yeah.
if I don't know the answer, which is usually the case, I can certainly connect you to somebody in the coalition who does.
For sure. There's always
Yeah.
somebody that knows everything, right?
Absolutely.
And is the number something easy that people can remember? Or I'll
Yes.
put it in the notes too. What's the helpline number?
It's 888-80 helpline, HELPLIN.
Oh, that's a great number.
Yeah, which is 888 804-3575.
Awesome. Okay, I'll definitely put that
Yeah,
in the notes.
terrific.
I want to shift just a bit and talk about Black people in the adoption
Yes.
space, because you are one. And
Yes.
when I think of a Black adoptee, I almost always think about white parents. And I've talked to several
Yes.
people on the show, but I've also talked to several like you that grew up with same race parents.
Yes.
So I know it does exist. But
Absolutely.
why are there not more same race adoptive families for Black kids?
Well, there are a number of reasons. And the one reason that I have seen in my experience is that historically, and in my history, like I said, only goes back to 1990.
Okay.
Historically, what I've seen is that somebody has to make a decision who is appropriate. And these folks are not any different than the overall population. So all the things that are current in the population in terms of racism, sexism, misogyny,
Mhm.
all that stuff is here as well.
Okay.
So if I'm deciding what's an appropriate family, if I'm deciding what the requirements are, there are
Mhm.
people that are going to be etched out of that just because, in my estimation, they're not appropriate.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest part.
Okay. Yeah.
That's always going to be a
And
problem.
this is social workers that make those choices, right? Or judges?
Yes, social workers, agencies, the legislative bodies, the Office of Children and Family Services, the municipalities, all the same people who make all of the decisions.
And they're predominantly white, right?
Right? So why
Yeah.
would this be any different? So
Mhm.
that's a big piece of it. I don't think there's any reason outside of the reasons that everybody would give. I think racism, I think sexism, I think the heteronormative, blah, blah, blah. I think all of those biases
Mhm.
are in play. So that's a big part of it. And there's also, I think it was Dr. Shafali. I heard her say something about the parenting industrial complex.
Oh.
And I like to think of that as just this whole collective, this whole idea that family is blood. All
Mhm.
of that factors in as well. Because adoption is still one of those things that when people say to you, oh my God, I wish I had the heart that you have.
Oh,
I wish I had the room. I get so attached. I get all of these reasons. Really, what they're saying to you is you're out of your mind. I don't know why you'd be taking these other people's problems
I could never
and
do
blah,
that.
blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. And that's a little game I play with myself over the course of my life is whenever you hear those accolades, and we all get them as
Mhm.
adopted parents. Oh, God bless you. Oh, really what you need to hear is, oh, you are crazy. Why would you want to take them bad kids on it? Blah, 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 blah. And that's part of it. That's part of it.
Yeah.
Because if we truly loved children and family in the
Mhm.
way that the media and the movies and all that stuff tells us, then we would be fighting like hell to keep them in their family of origin.
That's right.
There wouldn't be this whole I gotta yank them out
Yes.
reflex.
I agree.
The disrespect that we have for birth family as a system gets translated to foster families,
Mhm.
to kinship family. If I'm involved with you, it's like the Groucho Marx joke, if I'm involved with you, then you're the problem. And that's the way our system
Yeah.
treats,
Yeah.
and that's the biggest part of it,
Uh-huh.
is that we have no trouble finding folk.
Mhm.
We just have to be honest about what we're finding folk to do.
Mhm. And ostensibly, the foster system is supposed to be temporary to help
Right,
the birth parents figure out what they're
right.
doing, get them back
That's
on
the
track.
theory.
But
Yes.
that is not really the way they're treated. It feels like the birth parents are made to jump through so many hoops that are obstacles, like, yeah, see if you can run this gauntlet. Good
Right,
luck. And then
right.
poof, your kids are gone. What is that about? Why do they make it so hard?
I think a lot of it is those other things that we
The
talked about that are
racism.
going on in
Yes.
society,
Mhm.
all of those isms.
Yeah.
That stuff, because we're never free of
Nope.
those.
Nope. It's
We're
just always
people when we
there.
wake up, we're people when we go to bed, we're people on Monday, we're people on Sunday.
Yep.
So we're not free of that ever. And we make judgments. This is the judgment business.
Yeah.
We make assessments. We predict the future.
If you were loose enough to have a child out of wedlock, or
Absolutely.
there's all this morality
Absolutely.
stuff. Oof.
Absolutely. And it all goes
Gosh.
back to whatever our journey was. I talked to some social workers. Why are you here? Why are you
Mm.
in this heartbreaking, wrenching field of service?
Yeah. Interesting.
That has nothing to do with strangers. That has something to do with you directly. And it's
Mhm.
not a bad thing.
Mhm.
It's just a thing.
Mhm.
And we need to be willing to open that up and look at it.
Yeah.
And we'll get a lot of our answers from that.
Yeah. Interesting to reflect on that. And say you have a social worker that really, really wants to either reunite the child with their birth family or
Mhm,
find
mhm.
kinship or
Permanency,
a
yeah.
same race.
Yeah.
Are there enough?
And there are plenty of those. There are plenty of those.
There
Oh,
are?
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And this is one of the things that's been a real kind of conundrum for me is that people think because I'm pointing out the fact that this is a personal
Mhm.
decision,
Mhm.
that implies some kind of malfunction, something bad, something wrong.
Okay.
It's just a drive, just like anything else. And some of the best people that I have ever met in my life have been in this field between the workers and
Mhm.
the family.
Mhm.
Incredible people
Mhm.
do monumental things.
Mhm.
I have a lot more faith in us as human beings than I think people think I do. I just haven't been able to figure out a way to transmit that message that it's about you
Mhm.
and that that's okay.
Mhm.
And I like to think that the way my mother raised me, I am her child, and her values are my values, even though she didn't transmit to me not nearly enough of my information.
Mhm.
Now,
Yeah.
would that have made me easier to parent? I don't know. Would that have made me a better person? I don't know. But one, I think it would have made her life a heck of a lot more something
Mhm.
if she were able to talk about some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And it would have given me information that I needed in order to make decisions about how I was going to move forward in my life. I managed to do okay
Yeah.
simply because my expectation was I knew my mother, and this was me putting words in her mouth. I knew my mother wanted me to be a good person. I
Okay.
know she wanted me to be successful, and I know she wanted me to just succeed,
Mhm.
whatever that meant.
Mhm.
My brother, as an example, went the other direction because he just fought against everything,
Ah,
you know?
yeah.
And the most peace that he had, and I'll just throw this out, the most peace that he had in his life, I think, was probably the last couple of years of his life. And that was the point where I was given my birth certificate and he knew what that meant for him,
Okay. Oh,
and that's when he stopped using drugs. That's
really?
when he settled back in, moved back in with my mother.
Mhm.
And a couple of years later, he passed away.
Oh
But
gosh.
I just think we need to have more faith in us as people, and we need to somehow figure out a way to look at our spirit. And it's okay to figure out what drives you. It's going to be useful information,
Yeah. And it will
you
help
know,
our kids.
and it'll help our kids immensely,
If you wanna be helping your kids, do our own
immensely.
work.
Right,
It seems kind of,
right,
illogical, but really that's what it comes down
yeah,
to for sure. Yeah.
right. What's that saying? The best thing you can do for your children is love their mother. As a
Ah,
father, is
yeah,
love their mother.
yeah,
And the best thing mothers can do for their children is love themselves
yeah.
enough to figure out
What's going on, and it's tough, but what we're asking our kids to do
yeah,
is even tougher, so let's do our part of it
absolutely.
and be there for our kids, and that connection is so important. Do you work a lot with the older kids and
Mhm.
maybe your own kids? I don't know. Do you see a lot of kids that kind of struggle so much they kind of go off the deep end with addiction and mental health issues? Do
Yeah.
you see that a lot?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do know it's more in our population than the general population, but I think a lot of that has to do with the struggle more so than the event. Because
Mhm.
we like to blame adoption
Yeah.
for everything. Now, if I have had a kid for 15 years,
Mhm.
I got a piece in there. I
Yeah,
got a piece in
for
there
sure.
of some stuff, right? So that's not to say that it's not the sole factor, but it's a piece of it. And if we could own that piece,
Yeah,
then maybe it'll make life
yeah,
easier for someone somewhere. And I wish I could say for sure that, oh, do this, do that, do this, and you'll have a easy ride. That's not life.
for anybody,
That's not
right?
life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I had known more when Joey was little.
Mm,
I don't know if I could have prevented him from
right.
finding substances because, God,
Right.
they're everywhere at school and
Right.
everything. He might have still grabbed it, but maybe not
Right.
quite so hard or maybe not quite so often, or I don't know.
Yeah.
I just think
Who knows?
if I had known that more adoptees are going to be drawn to that kind of wanting to escape,
Yeah.
I would have been a little bit more alert. I hope I would have been.
Let me tell you this. We started having kids in 1991, right? I worked at two very progressive agencies. We were doing this stuff. We were talking about the kind of trust base, how important
Hmm.
connection was.
Hmm.
Just hang on, love your kids,
Hmm.
show them, open your life to them,
Hmm.
show them how you live.
Hmm.
We were doing all that stuff. We were saying all those
Hmm.
things. And that didn't stop me from responding from the fact that I had my mother on a pedestal.
Oh,
My mother was a saint. And
okay.
so when my daughter, the first time she rolled her eyes and sucked her teeth and slammed that door, she might as well
Oh,
have tried to knock my mother off that pedestal. And I'd
oh,
lost my mind. Now, fortunately, the saving grace for me is I went to work every day and I could talk about that stuff.
okay.
I didn't have to put that away. And I went to work and I talked to other experienced parents who had children older than me. And they helped me see, well, that's what they do. This is that age, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I was at my wit's end for the entire period. But my oldest is 47
Mhm.
and my youngest is about to be 30,
Okay.
right? And I hear now, fortunately, I hear from them that, oh, yeah, you were nuts about this and you never did that very well and you were this, and that, and the other. But the bottom line is they're all good people and they all are able to call me out on the stuff that I did. So my point is, you can't see it until you can see it. That's why we got to get them going early. And that's why it needs to be a system wide thing
Yeah.
where when folks are interested in adopting, and I'm not even talking about the lawyers and that, but anytime there's a system
Yeah.
involved, we ought to be helping people recognize that job number one has to be the connecting piece.
Yeah.
And the only way you're going to connect is by being totally honest with your child about what drives you,
Yeah.
because that's what they need from us.
And to get there, you have to be honest with yourself and have worked through that
Yes.
first. So that
Yes.
early piece and that education and support early on, that seems so critical. And it seems like what you guys are doing so well over there at AFFCNY. And I so respect the work you guys are doing. And it's got to be really tough, the things you see every day. I'm sure it's some heartbreaking stories, but then I bet you get a lot of really great, gratifying stories too, right?
Most of the ones now are very, very
Oh,
gratifying. I mean,
good.
one of the most incredible things that I experienced coming here is that all of these folks have been around. These
Okay.
are, for the most part, not brand new parents. All of these
Oh,
folks have been around, they've been up and they've been down and they've tried everything.
okay.
There is so much knowledge here. And every one of them will tell you, oh, I wish I'd done that differently. I wish I'd known
Sure.
that then. And the reality is you don't.
Yep.
But there's so much. And that's why I encourage people to call the helpline, because if I don't know the answer, and like I said, most times I don't, I can connect you with somebody who's been there.
Yeah.
I don't have to make stuff up.
Yeah. You know of enough
I
people.
can give you an email. I can connect you right to them or find out what you need.
Yeah.
And that's the whole purpose of it all. We have to find a way to keep parents from being isolated and only having the voices that they've always had,
Mhm.
because it's a different experience. You
Yeah.
can't ask somebody who hasn't adopted to help you understand why this hurts so much or why this is so challenging.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
You gotta find the other adopted parents
right,
or the other adoptees or whoever
right,
you are. Find your tribe that
yeah,
understands,
right.
and particularly probably find people of your same race, I would guess, or culture would
Absolutely.
also help, like
Whatever makes them easier to speak to. If it's easier to
yes,
talk to your own folks, then please, by all means, find your own,
find them.
but just make
Yeah.
sure that they're not helping to keep you in the melodrama,
Aha.
because there are lots of
Aha.
folks that go and they just want to bang on that and bang on their kids. Oh, they just did that and they did this and they got all the,
Uh,
now we've armed them with all these terms. So everybody's an expert. Everybody's a
yeah.
neurobiologist. And this one's got that one and this one's got this, that, and the other thing and on and on and on. And the reality is that's not going to help you to
Uh-huh.
do what you need to do. And what you need to do is connect to your child and not worry about whether you feel connected. That's not important. What's
Mm,
important is the child has to feel connected to you. And the only thing that's going to
beautiful.
make that happen is if I get a sense that you're a safe person.
Safe.
And if you're hiding
Yeah.
stuff from me, you're not a safe person.
Yeah, kids can sense that a mile away. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for that great advice. I hope everybody goes and finds some extra layers of support after today. There's so much out there.
absolutely.
There's really no excuse now with the internet and online support groups, Zooming. I mean, you don't even have to get in your car anymore.
Yeah,
Just,
that's right.
just
That's
go.
right.
Chester will answer the phone 24/7.
That's right.
Is there anything else that you would like to mention before we close up?
I just like to thank you for the
Mm-mm.
opportunity. And I really think that the prescription, if I could give one to prospective folks or really parents in general, is to dig deep and find out what you got to do. Find out what motivates you and then do what you need to do in response to that.
Great advice.
Like you said, we put so much on our kids and we remember what we're asking them to do.
Definitely. Definitely. And besides the helpline number, is there any other way you would like to connect with people?
Well, they can go to our website. We've got a ton of information on there,
Mhm.
affcny.org. There's an absolute ton of information there. You can get access to all of our groups. Join our network
Mhm.
through the website, because then you get the calendar of our events. I guarantee you'll find something that'll inspire you, motivate you, and educate you.
There's so much out there. You guys are doing great work,
Thank you.
and it's not just for people in New York,
No, yeah, no,
right?
you can call from anywhere.
Great. Well, look that up. I'll put that all in the notes. And while you're in the notes, go ahead and find our Facebook and our Instagram, YouTube. Find Unraveling Adoption at unravelingadoption.com. I do have a free support group for adoptive parents, and I also do parent coaching. So that is all on my website as well. And we are on Patreon if anyone would like to support this show so we can continue our commercial free episodes. I never think it's a good idea to interrupt these deep conversations with, and now a moment from our sponsor. So I don't want to do that. So if anyone wants to support it with Patreon, it's patreon.com/unravelingadoption. And we really appreciate you listening to this important episode. Please share it with anyone you know. I think this one would be particularly good for any hopeful adoptive parents. Anyone thinking about fostering, I think this one would be a really good one for them to listen to. So go ahead and share this episode. That really helps us a lot. And we are just so grateful that you spent the time listening to us.
Yes.
Thanks again, Chester, for being here. And Chester and I want you all to stay safe.